Good morning. Well, this morning, we're talking about breath, and breathing, and living, and dying, and things like that. Fortunately, we have a pathologist with us here this morning, so if things go badly, you at least know. Every quarter, I get this magazine from the church, from the Mennonite church. It's called The Leader, and it's for pastors. It's got a few articles in it and things. So this particular one is about emotional intelligence. And in the back, there's stuff there about worship services. So this time, it was mostly about Lent. I mean, and this is where we get our themes from, and the calls to worship, and confessions, and all of these things are in there. And then there's this section called Sermon Seeds, which I usually actually don't look at very much. But once in a while, I do just to get some more ideas about what I could be preaching about. And this week, the Sermon Seeds contain the following sentence: how might the Spirit be ready to bring our dead communities back to life? And I thought, I am so glad I don't think that way about this church. And I feel so bad for the person who wrote this. Some pastor thinks that about their church. That's so sad. So, I mean, we're a small community, but there's a huge difference between small and dead. Right? I mean, like when I take my dog for a walk, sometimes I meet people who've got these tiny little dogs, you know, that just want to kill everything. Right? And they might be small, but they are far from dead. One of the proverbs in the book of Proverbs is better a living dog than a dead lion or something like that, right? So anyway, I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you are alive, and I'm glad that we are alive. Ezekiel, from the dry bones story, he's feeling dead. And his community is feeling dead. And it's important as we go through that this morning to realize that for Ezekiel and for Jesus and sort of in this whole thing, breath is both literal and metaphor. There's this metaphor, right, of being truly alive, but for Ezekiel, a lot of his community is quite literally dead. That they have been invaded by the Babylonians, who caused massive quantities of literal death. And so there are some of them left. There are some of them out in Babylon in exile, and right? But they probably also saw many people die along the way. Because it's like a 500-600 mile walk from Jerusalem to Babylon. When was the last time you walked 500 or 600 miles after having been besieged and captured? And this isn't like, the nice walk through the countryside in Spain. This is the nice walk because then no one's feeding you much. And there's not like bottles of water stations along the way. And there's some back in Jerusalem, few left, and the farmers that nobody cares about, but not a lot. And there's some that fled to Egypt, but they had to flee to Egypt, so they're probably struggling too. And so the nation of Israel is dead, a lot of them, and those that are alive may not be feeling like they have any advantage over the dead. And there's a real question about whether the people of Israel as a people will survive this. And so Ezekiel is given this vision. He's been prophesying mostly gloom and doom until now, but now that the exile has happened, God has a new message. God has a message for the dry bones that are Israel. And the message that Ezekiel is given is sort of difficult to translate because Hebrew only has one word that means both breath and spirit and wind. Right? Ruach means all three of those things, and so it's tricky to know, they have no breath, they have no spirit, right? And the wind blows, and that's all the same word in there, which makes it much more interesting than we could possibly do in English. But this is what God prophesies to the dry bones that are Israel. So the bones come together, and the sinews come together, and the skin covers them, and all this other little bits and pieces that you need to have. But there's no breath, there's no spirit in them. And the same can be true for a church. Right? You can have a building, and you can have committees, right? And you can have people to do various tasks, and you can get together and sing on Sunday mornings. But that isn't the spirit, that isn't the breath of the church. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to take a pencil that's somewhere around you. In the pew in front of you, there's probably a little pencil. And take out your bulletin and write on the back of your bulletin somewhere what you think the breath, the spirit of this congregation is. What is it that makes this congregation alive? Just for you, right? What makes this a living place? And maybe if you're not feeling that way, write down what you think should be here so that it was a living place. What is it that brings you back? When you've done that, share your answer with somebody around. The reason that I asked you to write your answers on the back of your bulletin is that most of you recycle your bulletins at the end. And so I want a chance this week to read what it is you wrote. You might want to edit it now, I don't know, right? But I want to read what you wrote so that we can keep doing it. Right? Because if there's something specific we're doing that makes this place alive, maybe it's not something we're doing, but if it is, I want to make sure we keep doing it and maybe even do it better. I don't know. Because that's what Ezekiel wants. He wants Israel to be alive. And that's what God wants. God wants Israel as a people to come alive. He wants a strong Israel. His goal is to bring hope to a people that feel dead. They feel defeated. So again, right, it's always in Israel, in Ezekiel, and in John, both metaphor and literally, that all this breath and spirit thing are being talked about. And as I mentioned last week, in order to read this stuff, even to go through these last few weeks of Lent, you sort of have to learn to speak in capital letters. Right? We've talked about bread, but then we talk about bread. Right? And we talked about water, but then there's water of life. Right? Sort of like when you read poo. Right? When you read Winnie the Pooh, you have to learn to speak in those capital letters that are, right? So John is sort of the same way. He doesn't have the advantage upper and lower case because in ancient Greek, in John's day, they wrote in all uppercase. And Hebrew doesn't have upper and lower case, so you sort of, you gotta figure it out for yourself. And so Lazarus too, right? Jesus is always working on multiple levels in the book of John, and John is always writing on multiple levels, not just 2, but 3 or 4 or 5 usually, at the same time. So this is what's going on. And it's a long story. One of the things I think we've noticed in the last few weeks is that these stories in John, they're awfully long. Right? We're used to these little parables, you read through the synoptics and you can, 4 or 5 verses, and you get to John and 45 verses to read a story. Oh, that's a long time to sit and listen to the Bible. Our Bible comes to us in little chunks usually, and John seems to come to us in these bigger chunks because there's all of this stuff swirling around, and to decently preach on this story would mean we'd be here all week, honestly, because there's that much in this story. But I wanted to pick out just a couple of things, and the first thing, the one thing I noticed as I was reading it this time that I hadn't seen quite the same way before, is that Jesus, right, is not near Bethany at the time, and there's a reason he's not there. And the reason comes to us from the previous chapter, from chapter 10, verse 31. And chapter 10, verse 31, which I don't know if you have nearby, but anyway, Jesus in chapter 10, and just previously in the story, was just in Jerusalem, right near where Mary and Martha and Lazarus were living. And he was preaching in Jerusalem and having conversations and things like that. And then this happened. Verse 31, the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Again. And this wasn't like, well, they had a committee meeting in which they expressed disapproval. Right? Or this wasn't like, oh, and somebody happened to shout at him, which for us would be, like a lot already for something to happen. Like, if someone ever shouted in this church, we'd start to go, oh, right? But this is a whole nother level. This is like the religious leaders are picking up stones again to stone Jesus. And so what he does after this is he heads out of the country, actually, insofar as there are countries back in those days, which there aren't. But anyway, right? He goes across the Jordan River to, right, and somebody else's territory. I mean, it's still all Roman territory, but someone else is king in that territory. He's staying out of trouble. And then he hears about Lazarus, and he hangs around there for a few days, but then he goes back to be in the neighborhood region of Jerusalem, which means that he's going back, and he is taking his life into his own hands. He's risking his life to bring Lazarus back to life. Yeah, that's right. So this isn't just, well, I'm over here and I'm going to hang around here for a while, and then I'll go over there. Right? It's not that simple, and the disciples know it. I don't know if you noticed the verse as we got to it, but in chapter 11, verse 16, Thomas says, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." The disciples went along, and they expected to die. And they said, "We're going anyway." And that really changes the story for me. It's not like, well, we're over here, and then we'll go over to Bethany and hang out with Mary and Martha for a while, right? And then we'll go up to Galilee and we'll hang out there for a while. It's like, no, we're going to go to Bethany and we're not coming back. And that's okay. It's a serious kind of story. This week brought the news of the death of a young man named Michael Sharp. I don't know if you've noticed this or this sort of passes your awareness. Michael was I was going to say young man, but that's just because I'm old, who many years ago was in what is now the Congo, working with the Mennonite Central Committee, and then as life went on, he started to work for the United Nations, but still working in Congo. Because he knew the people and he knew the situation insofar as a Westerner could ever understand what's going on in Africa. And so he went in with a fellow United Nations worker last week and went to investigate the report of mass graves that had been found there, and was kidnapped with the other UN worker and the drivers and all the other people. And then the next day his body was found in a shallow grave. This was reported in significant part of the media. And one of the things that was interesting was that even the New York Times noted that Michael went in there because of his compassion. He went in there, they talked about the empathy he felt even with the nastiest people that he worked with. And if you're working in that part of the world, there's some nasty people there. If you know anything about the history of the Congo, it just makes you want to leave. You know, it's horrible. And he went in there, and he knew every time he went in that he might not come back out. And this was not a metaphor. That breathing was not a metaphor for him. And right, at some point it isn't. It ceases to be a metaphor for us too. One of the experiences I enjoyed in Ghana is that we would have chapel in church 5 days a week. And in a 30-minute chapel, a solid 10 minutes would be spent praying. And the first thing you prayed for every day in chapel was breath. Because in Ghana, there isn't much difference in people's conception between sleep and death. Basically, the assumption is sleep is pretty much the same as death. And so every time you wake up, it's a little resurrection. And then, so the first thing we prayed for is, thank God that you woke up alive this morning. Because many people didn't. Because all over the world, many people didn't this morning. Breathe in, breathe out. This is a good thing. Other people don't. But that's not enough. Or it doesn't have to be enough. Jesus has come to offer us a life worth living and even a life worth dying for. But a life worth dying for is that much more worth living. It's sort of this paradox thing that always goes on through John 2. It's not the joy of risk, though. And if all you really need is the joy of risk, that's easy, right? Take a skateboard and go stand on the street here and see how fast you can get going down Virginia Avenue. I know somebody who did that on the longboard and isn't breathing anymore. The risk is real. Right? If that's really all you want, that's easy to do around here. But Jesus offers you more than that. But also, at the same time, offers you community. So we are here. And our hope, right, is that as a community and as individuals, we are always moving toward life, not toward death. The death, right, is always there. But we continue to move toward life, right, even as we